I do not have the technical difficulties card.
Where's my sign?
We're good? All right. Good morning again. If you didn't hear my greeting the first time, good morning. Welcome to our class this Sunday morning with Guy Finley. My name is John. As I was just saying a moment ago, it's a pleasure to be here with you. For those of you online, if you are new here, if this is the first time you're joining us, again, welcome. In a moment, Guy will present a talk that lasts about 60 minutes, and it is on a topic that he has already set aside for us this morning. And then after that talk, when he's finished, we take a short break, and then we'll come back for an open discussion, a Q&A session in which we are invited to share our own thoughts and comments and questions related to the material he presented. And those of you online can do the same. And together, hopefully we will learn just a little bit more, understand just a little more deeply the material that Guy has presented today. So I hope the students in the room will take advantage of that, and I invite you online to take advantage of that opportunity as well. During the broadcast, if those of you online need any support of any kind, you can email us at support@guyfinley.org, and Kate will do her best to answer your question. And you can also use that email address and the chat areas to communicate with us throughout the broadcast. So I think we're ready to get started. If you have a cell phone, just a quick reminder, if you have a cell phone in the room, do please check and make sure you've turned it off. All right. Here is this morning's topic and the first key lesson. Our topic is the invisible gift of life that never stops giving. And here is the first key lesson. Once we learn what it means to see ourselves, to accept every impression as the herald of the new self-knowledge that it brings, then we will not only understand what it means to welcome each such revelation, whether wanted or not, but to receive with grace whatever we are given to see as being true about ourselves.
But to receive with grace whatever we are given to see and discover about ourselves. How many of you won't be found under the word grace in the dictionary? We have a really important, not that all of them aren't, topic for today. And I would urge you, if you're capable and willing to do so, to change your body position. Don't sit in the usual slump or dump that you tend to sit in. Shake yourself free of whatever it is that you've brought into this moment with you. And you don't do it by shaking like a dog. You do it by seeing that there is a dog that when it gets a bone in its mouth, it doesn't want to let it go. And so it is with this mind and the thoughts that it clings to that define it in the moment and that we find ourselves defined by. We'll go up and down in this talk. I'm going to give you a big picture. We're going to talk about things we've looked at, this idea of gathering or scattering, this idea of the observer is the observed, the whole idea of seeing and what it means. And we're going to do it all through a single study of this idea of impressions, something that most of us don't know much about other than being impressed with what somebody bought or with yourself because you momentarily achieved something you wanted. And that is not the kind of impression we're looking for. I don't have time to give you every impression that comes up while I'm speaking because they do. But I can tell you that if you want to know why you don't have the kind of impressions that change your life, they don't come without humility. Impressions and humility are inseparable, true impressions. I remember when I was a boy, back before the first Civil War, and I don't know why it is that I remember this, but I can tell you it's because of an impression that I received. There was a science teacher, Mr. Brown, and I won't go into details because I can't spend time spinning that tale, but he said and expressed something in front of the classroom, and it has remained with me my entire life. The point being that there are times when a single impression can change the entire direction of a person's life. And the reason that a single impression can change the entire direction of a person's life is because when there is an actual impression, it changes the nature of what it impressed itself upon. And the smallest change, 1 degree, 1,000th of 1 degree in a trajectory can send something off 1 billion miles along the line of time. Last night, my wife and I watched a PBS documentary, and I can't recommend it strongly enough, actually. I never do this. It was called Patrick and the Whale. I one time spoke of this thing called My Teacher, the Octopus, and this was a little bit along those lines. Oh my God. Speaking of St. Paddy's Day, Fiona, It warms the cockles of my heart. Thinking about this man, no one in particular, and yet someone who became something special to other people who, captured by the impression of what he was impressed by, begin to see all these other possibilities. Basically, he's always loved whales, and his favorite whales were never the whale that became his favorite. He loved blue whales, but he spent years and couldn't find one. And then one day he ran into a pod of sperm whales, and he met Dolores. That's what he named her. And so impressed was he by this ineffable emotional bond and physical bond that he then spent the rest of his life at his own expense trying to answer what had called to him from the moment when, as a boy, he and his father walked into a museum, and he had an indescribable impression when he saw this great blue whale there in the museum. He said, "It touched me." I spoke about this at depth yesterday, how the moment where I first saw these bonsai trees, the nature in the pot, the immense suffering that could be captured in a small living creature that small, stirred me and continues to stir me. There are moments where a person can feel through an impression a drawing. Patrick was drawn to study whales. Why? Because all of the lessons that would change his nature would be given to him through that particular relationship that he was drawn into, so that he can't say he drew himself to want to be in the ocean with Dolores or Can Opener, which was another small sperm whale. They give whales names based on the flukes or features on their body or on their tails. Because he could have never known that what drew him that wasn't himself and yet was a part of himself, or he couldn't be drawn to what he was drawn to, would have this inexpressible effect on the whole of his life, where lessons that could never be learned in any other way came to him through those impressions. And a lesson is only a real lesson when it changes the matter that absorbs the energy and the understanding inherent in that moment. Then the real lesson is the transformation in a person's character. I can't tell you how much I would recommend that to you. I know some of you don't give a hoot, speaking of other creatures. But I can tell you this beyond the shadow of a doubt: there is something that is interfering in your life with the receptivity of these impressions. And that is why, honestly, you don't change. That is why the experiences repeat themselves and repeat themselves and repeat themselves, because in every moment prior to the repetition of that moment, there is an inception. There is something that takes place between active and passive forces, between what is acting on you and producing that conditioned behavior, and the fact that you could in that moment have the impression of the fact that, oh my God, I am conditioned. I don't know what else to do in this moment but to act this out. And the impression of being a servant of your own unconscious nature is the first impression, the first shock that begins the true transformation, spiritually speaking, in your life. Something's interfering. Can you agree with me to that extent? That there come times when you know something's happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. And then I'm gone. I take no time to understand what is being given to me by a design so great that the divine, it's impossible to conceive. And I know some of you look at me like, this man is lunatic. And you know why you feel that way? because you don't know the love that is given to you in every moment where something new is passed along to you, and instead of letting it renew you, you throw it away in favor of the repetition of your lost life. That's why. Fall in love. That's the greatest gift that a human being can be given, is to discover that within him or her already exists a love that is beyond description and that must be met in that way, because your attempt to describe yourself through your relationships is what kills your relationships and the possibility of you receiving the impressions inherent in them. Now I'm going to start the talk. Something's interfering. Let's look at it ever so briefly and perhaps humorously. Let's have our actors on stage, please. I will set the stage for an act between a brother and a sister. The brother has come from his country, from his part of the state, to where his sister had moved. She got a new job, got a bunch of dough, bought a house, and she's going to all limits, all extents, whatever the word is, to decorate it. That's all that matters. And he agreed, in the good nature of himself, he didn't really want to do this, I might add, to come help her do this decoration of her home. So what you're about to see is they are standing in approximately the 7th store that they've been into. And he has a certain feeling going through him because not one purchase has been made by his darling sister. And pick it up, actors.
Whew. Honestly, sis, and I'm not complaining, but I really got to know.
And what's that?
Well, I could be mistaken, but over the last 3 hours, you've now looked at least at a dozen full-size, different mirrors in 7 different stores. You still haven't found the right one?
Well, I guess that's about right, but what's the point you're trying to make?
I don't know. I mean, if you can say it, exactly what kind of mirror are you hoping to find?
You really don't know?
No, honestly, sis, I don't know, but I would love to be clued in.
Silly boy, I'm searching for one that I like what I see when I look at myself in it.
And there you have the whole tragedy of humanity. I take it from your laugh that you understand how insane that is. That a person is waiting to see in a mirror something that agrees with what they want to see and imagine they should. And further, that anything other than what I want to see in the mirror is unimaginable to me. There's no way I'm interested in looking at anything that doesn't look exactly like what I want to see when I'm looking in the mirror of the moment. Do you even suspect how true that is about you? Imagine an oceanographer, maybe Patrick himself. Patrick, I can't remember his name. Kilpatrick. No, today's Patty's Day. Maybe that's why I said that. It was something like that. I know it was Patrick. Thank you. Imagine somebody comes and says, I love what you're doing. I want to grow and understand this relationship. I want to share. God, you wouldn't have believed it. I tell you. Nah. Impressions are always beyond any thought that can grasp them. Always. So anytime you think about an impression, you are not experiencing the impression. You are worshiping yourself in the mirror that looks and sees what it wants to see and then gives itself the meaning of what it looks at. Imagine somebody says, I want to go into the ocean like you. Great. And then for like 3 months, he watches this student, and all they do is walk through these little tidal pools after the ocean has retreated, its tide. What would he say to this person? How can you hope to understand the world that you say you want to understand unless you begin to realize you've had the invitation? Imagine this. Oh, see, I know I'm not going to get through all this. Imagine being invited by the ocean to discover yourself through it. I tell you, that's what your life is. I tell you, that's the real meaning of life. And everything else is to miss it. So you can see, can you not see that Patrick was invited by the ocean, by the whales, to discover something about a relationship through an impression that he never would have known, meaning he would have never known that within him lived that possibility of a perception that ended the separation of the idea of I'm different than the waters, I'm different than the whales, I'm different than the creatures in it. And then he even said this by extrapolation. He said, imagine if people had the same bond that these magnificent creatures do, where they will beach themselves out of empathy, where they will spend an immense amount of time. It was so extraordinary. These sperm whales, they sit inverted in the water like this, head up, and almost looking like Stonehenge. How will I ever become a man who understands what it's like to enter into that, as long as I live from a conditioned reaction that says, yes, I'll go there. Yes, that's okay. I like that. That's good. No, 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 no. I don't want anything to do with that particular part of the ocean. I don't want to know about that current. Those waves terrify me. I'm out. I'm in here. I'm out there. Now, do I have to explain to you the incredible conflict inside of a mind that on one hand has been invited, and as far as I'm concerned, I've used the phrase before, invited by the divine to discover the living divine in that man or woman through the impression the divine gives them in the moment of their relationship with life. I'm invited, but I don't think I'm invited. Why? Because I never bother to actually understand what in the name of God is going on in those moments when I feel called to whatever it may be. It could be anything. Every calling is a calling for discovery. The purpose of every discovery eventually is the revelation that in that discovery there's an impression that can be received nowhere else under any other circumstances. And then when you get that, and you wouldn't be here listening to me, I know that for sure, if you haven't had impressions. And in the moment of that impression, there's nothing in the world that compares to it. Yes or no? Why? Because in the moment of the impression, you're not there. There's just this beautiful movement between active, timeless forces and something that is being acted on in time, and in their union is the release of another order of awareness that human being says without knowing it, God, that warms my heart. That fills my mind. That quiets my body. This is the cup I want to drink from for the rest of my life, but only if it's labeled Dr. Pepper. You wonder how I make these transitions, do you? Oh, Diet Dr. Pepper. Well, because I don't want to drink from any cup that doesn't look, smell, and taste exactly like I want the cup to look, smell, and taste. Which means, like Christ, would that this cup would pass from my lips, but nevertheless, I will do what you will. I will drink from this cup. Why? Because I know by an act of faith, which is always experience born, the solidification of the understanding inherent in an impression, I know that there is something that waits for me if I will drink from the cup. If I will let the impression be fully formed, I know I will be freer for its entrance and its fulfillment and its passage. Yes? So how are we as men and women to understand something like I'm describing to you? Where does it begin? My mind wants to sing today. Where do I begin? The answer is through the awareness of the impression. If I don't have the awareness of the impression, I can't have the experience and the revelation the impression is intended to produce. No awareness of the impression, no experience of anything impressing itself upon my soul, and no elucidation, no illumination, no new discovery of the depths of one's own self. How many of you think of yourself as being a deep person? You can scoff at that, but you do. You think you're damn deep. You do. Which is why you get so irritated if should enemy intimate you don't understand. You say, you don't understand the depths of me. What you don't understand is the depths of the deception that's going on inside of you. Because when you fully understand, the only way that you are given any insight into the depths of the divine nature within you is when you are willing to swim in whatever the impression is that comes to you in that moment. And if you don't step into it, you are separated from the possibility of that perception and the promise of discovering something new that lies latent in your soul. Clear enough? So, important point. Have you ever had an impression that in the moment you had that impression, you didn't also have an impression simultaneously that you suddenly understand it's been there all my life? This is why St. Paul, we see life through a glass darkly. Suddenly the glass is clear, the mirror is polished, the dust removed. Suddenly I see it. And when I see, is it not instantaneously clear to me that what I now see has always been a part of me? Has always been a part of me. Always been a part of me. Always been a part of me. Yes? And further, that the experience of that impression is inseparable from that revelation. So that the revelation that something has always been a part of me, I can't have it without the impression that comes and reveals this unique relationship that I don't even know exists until that moment. Am I going too fast? So a real impression, and perhaps what makes it real, is that it is the instantaneous appearance of a sum that is greater than its parts. The appearance of a sum that is greater than its parts, which means what? The impression can't be separated from a sudden alignment of all the parts of the human being involved in that moment. Do you see? My mind, my heart, and my body, by some act of grace, something comes along, and usually my mind will say, no, that's not right. My heart will say, I don't want to feel that. My body will feel the resistance to anything that challenges its comfort, and I'm automatically cut off from the impression. But sometimes, thank God, what draws that moment is stronger than what is resisting it. And in the moment of being drawn, I am drawn into a realization, there's something deeper here. There's something more for me to explore. But what must I do in order to make that exploration fruitful instead of futile every time it's rejected? So a real impression reveals what? We've worked into this. I said I would at the start. A real impression, suddenly the observer and the observed are no longer apart. Can you make that leap with me? Patrick has this impression of a blue whale at the age of 15 years old. And now he's 35 years old, spending his own money on expedition after expedition all around the world. It was breathtaking. I'm sure he got funded along the way. You can't love something, really love something that doesn't have a certain kind of fruit to it. It's impossible. The men and women are so starved for love that they will, and quite naturally, be drawn to the love of someone else that they have. And if they are, it's because they are drawn not to what that person loves, but to the love itself. And then that begins to act through them. And they start to understand why they were drawn. Love simply wants you to know that love exists, and it's always within you. It's always calling to you, but you always have a sign out, closed. That understanding, well, how am I doing? Halfway through. What I just described to you, can we say we understand that? Can you see that understanding, that kind of self-knowledge, which isn't in thought at all, is the, how shall I say, because I want you to understand this idea of an artesian well. That self-knowledge is the wellspring of saints, sages, the wise men and women who through this period of time, all through time, have elucidated, have brought into this world through what they have received, what we could call a divine wisdom, an unshakable strength, a fearlessness. You attach whatever word you want to attach to, and you can see that the reason that they, listen, not that they have what they have. Do you know that any sane human being would never say, I have this? Ever. Ever. What they would say is, I am this, and they would say, I am, without referring to themselves. They don't have this wisdom, they are this wisdom. And the reason they are this wisdom is because they are forever participating in the impressions that produce a new wisdom, a deeper wisdom, a stronger relationship with the depth of themselves in which and has always existed this beautiful intelligence. Okay? What do you want? Just wait a minute. That'll produce a new impression. When I was thinking about this idea, and we have a key lesson coming up, but it's not yet. Very special. But I have to explain it. I was thinking about this, and I thought to myself, is there a moment in life where there isn't an impression being made? Because if you could put together what we've just looked at, that means there would be no moment in your entire life where some impression isn't being made. And if the impression is in fact the relationship with what gives it by bringing out of the person the corresponding aspect to the impression, that would mean, wow, that'd be like being reborn all the time. Sunlight makes an impression on water. What could be more different? Sunlight and water. But no light, no sunlight hits water without transferring some of its energy into the molecules of the water. And the minute that the warmth and light of the sun impresses itself on the molecules of the water, it starts to bend the atoms in that water, and it agitates them. Have you ever seen angry water? That'll be the next. I played as a celebrity in this golf tournament in the desert, and you know what the big product was that they were pushing down there? You looked at it, it looked like a can of beer. It was called Death Water. Death water. Artesian death water. It's like they had this perfume called Poison for a while. Do you understand you actually are in a living hell on this planet? And that human beings worship these things because it gives them a certain identity. Death water, poison. Let me spray myself with some poison. I can't wait to attract a poisonous man. So this angry water, this will be the next big thing. Angry water. Soothing. This water does what as it starts to move faster? What does it do? When water starts moving as fast as it can, what happens to it? It's transformed. It's transformed. Don't know why my voice is breaking up. Water acted on by light is transformed because the impression the sun makes on the water actually changes its nature. Do you see it? And can you now, wait a minute. I'm 97% water. By the way, you are. There was a Star Trek where this alien called human beings ugly bags of water. Boy, did they have that right. Not only is there all of this light that you can see, which is minuscule, but all of the light you can't see is never-endingly creating impressions on a body that you don't even know you have because you're not aware of it within you. Truthfully, we're not even aware of our physical bodies. It's a rare thing when a man or a woman, unless they're hungry for sunlight, walks out and takes a moment. Do you ever watch in the sunrise or sunset where the geese, the deer, everything will lay down and they will all be facing the sun? The impression that I'm describing is presently so subtle that most of us don't even know that an impression is being made within us, upon us, for the sake of educating us to something that we have yet to discover about ourselves. Yes? But just because I don't see it and I can't feel it yet, doesn't mean it's not taking place, does it? Are you able to just make a tiny leap and realize, you know what, it's true. I've sensed it, I've seen it. God, I'd really like to have a living relationship between what is always active and what is always passive, so that in the marriage of these two seemingly separate conditions, something altogether new can be born, created, and if I'm there, I can participate, listen to me, not in the individual impression. Individually, they have value, but they're worthless compared to the collected impression of understanding I am meant to be a living impression, forever being impressed by the divine, to discover the indwelling divine in me through its impression. That's the possibility. This is where we start. For the longest time, I may have to, stir you a little bit. By the way, isn't a class an impression at large? The energy is an impression, isn't it? So the impression is the temporary effect of what? Of a relationship between active and passive. But we cannot by ourselves create these impressions, can we? We are all the time giving ourselves impressions. I like how I look in this mirror. I don't like how I look in this one. I like the way I feel around you. You, Not you. Let's bring up the key lesson, please. I'll go through it slowly. I can only pray that you study it as deeply as it requires, so you can receive the impression within it. The first three words are critical. Impression is transformation. Just stop. Don't go past that. Impression is transformation. Is it not? Can something act on water that doesn't change? Can light act on water without changing the water it acts on? So the water is transformed by the invisible light, is it not? So can you extrapolate from that idea that there is no moment in which an impression isn't creating transformation, because by the very act of transformation, it is acting on something, receiving the impression, and by that it is changed. Yes? Now we can go on. Impression is transformation. The caveat. But what is transformed all depends on who is aware of that interaction. Remember that C.S. Lewis quote? In the end, people will say, I've always been in heaven, and they'll be right. And the others will say, I've always been in hell, and both are correct. This idea, who is aware of the interaction, everything's critical. What am I? And here you are, I don't like you. I like you, Chrissy. Most of the time I like you. I like Chrissy, I do. So I look at Chrissy, and Chrissy's got that look on her face. Now, ordinarily, does Chris know the impression that she's making? I hope I can get this in talk. Sometimes I listen to some of you. I'm pointing to certain people. And you have no idea that the impression you're making is creating the reaction you're receiving. And when you receive the reaction you do, you then try as best you can to prove that you're not, that you don't deserve what you're getting when you asked for it by the impression you were giving. And what does that mean? Why am I giving this impression of living, walking backwards, always saying I'm sorry, of being someone who nobody understands? Why do I give that? Because in the moment, my mind has been caught in a kind of a loop where it is forever feeding itself the impression from the past self, and then resisting its own inclination, and then trying to escape this circle of unconscious thought. That's what it does. And so it's caught in an impression of its own making. That's why that key lesson says it all depends on who is aware of the interaction. Do you understand that now? Because if I'm not aware of the impression that you're giving me, or that's just coming in by the full moon, by the eclipse, by the planetary alignment, all of that, if I'm not aware of it and I'm just suddenly full of resistance, do you ever wake up in the morning feeling like you've gone 12 rounds with Mike Tyson? You get beat up by a dream of some kind? So then you wake up and the impression is what? Going to be a hell of a day. Oh my God, going to be a hell of a... And so something is acted on you, hasn't it? And what is it acted on that allows you to reach the conclusion that the day is going to be nothing but trouble? The past. Your conditioned nature takes the impression and returns the impression with a conditioned reaction that sets in this loop these unending dark impressions that tell you you're dead in the water. You follow that much? So, impression is transformation, but what is transformed depends on who is aware of that interaction. Next. This I can't tell you. This was the best I could word it, given the short time I had on it. Every impression is the first and the last of its kind. Even though by an act of grace there will be others will appear of a similar strain. Every impression is the first and the last of its kind. And you mustn't fall into despair or get depressed. You hear something, you mean that impression, it came and it's gone and it'll never come again? That particular impression, yes, it is come and gone. You miss the impression, you miss the possibility of being invited into a revelation that would release you from your past. This conditioned consciousness, not your past. It is somewhat formulated by our personality. But so if I'm not present to the impression, I've missed the presence. I've missed the present moment. If I'm not present to the impression, I've missed the present moment in which active and passive are being brought together in an integrated state, so that out of the integration, something new can be born. But grace intercedes. If there was just that one moment of impression and you missed it, we'd be dead. Because if impression actually is transformation, on the high side and the low side, you can understand the low side. Do I have to go through that again? If I take the impression and it just proves to me that I'm right to be negative, I'm right to be negative the rest of my life. I'm a dead man walking. But if on the other hand, the impression of my negativity finally begins to fall on me, that I can see by that impression, you know what? This is telling me why I feel this way, but now I can see through the impression what in the name of God is talking to me. In that moment, something changes in what was impressed on before, yes? And when it changes in the smallest way, does it not change the whole of the structure of that system, yes? So every impression, first and last of its kind. If the earth and the sun and all of the planets moved exactly like a clock, so that it was always exactly in the same position relative to all of the other celestial forces acting on them, there would be no chance for a human being to ever have a new impression. Time would just repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, and a human being, God help them, would be no different than the animals who are incapable of receiving impressions, locked in the unending change of reincarnating their species through the sacrifice of the individual. You and I, by the grace of God, which is unfathomable, have a chance, because something changes ever so infinitesimally, to see the infinity of our possibility to become a different kind of human being. Please? Transition. Every impression tells its own story. Every impression tells its own story. I don't know how he does it. No human being ever has the same impression, even though all of the constituent elements and aspects that are brought together in that intersection are the same. That's because every human being coming into this world, at the moment of that inception, if you'll use those words, are put together in such a certain way that the notes, the sound, the light, the life of that person is always acted on by light in a different way. The light that touches the water in Crystal, what's the name of the lake up here? Lake Shasta? No. Crater Lake. Beautiful, dark blue. The light that acts on it similar to the light of the dark brown Mississippi or the African rivers, but everything that acts is a different action, producing different things. So, every impression tells its own story. You got that much? And the hallmark of an impression is what? The hallmark of an impression. Bringing it all together. The hallmark of the impression is that it transcends thought. Yes? And if it transcends thought, that means a true impression transcends the thinker. And that's part of the impression. Oh my God, there's an understanding that I didn't even know existed. Because all I know is what I think about, who I think about, why I think you shouldn't think that way. Suddenly I see, wow, there really is another level of being. That's what the moment of these impressions are drawing you to. If we can collect them now into a single idea, suddenly through that impression, if I have enough, if I'm present enough, which we're going to get to in the exercise, if I'm present enough, I start to, you know what? The whole thing's trying to tell me something. Not the individual. See, I know that you think this. You and I think the individual impression, as it is, it's part of this consciousness. You and I have been deceived, and it's a proper word, not by some evil entity, but by a divided mind. We have been deceived into believing that impressions are to be judged. Please, yes or no? I have an impression of you. Any impression I have of any human being. I believe the impression is the invitation to judge what it is that has pressed itself in on my life. You. I believe that the impression of a moment I don't want actually somehow or other is to be judged. Because in judging the moment I don't want, which is, what is the moment what is the moment I don't want? What is any moment I don't want? We've talked about this. Is it the event or my experience of it? So really what I don't want is the way I experience the moment. What is my experience of the moment? My impression. Not even my impression. My experience of the moment is the impression of it. And the impression is the relationship between the active and passive, between what is divine and what is earthly, between what is timeless and what is in time. And you and I walk around. Now take the story that we opened the talk with. You got that, right? What are you looking for? Well, I'm going to be happy when I finally find a mirror that I like the way I look in it. Then I'm going to buy that mirror. In fact, I'm going to put them all over the house so I never have to look at anything other than what I want to look at. Wake up. Wake up. I'm talking to a student, but if it applies. So, all I want is to see what I want to see. I actually don't know any other way to be in the moment. Because my moments are determined by an inescapable impression. If the light acts on the water, by God, do you think for a moment that out of all the infinite planetary, celestial, and otherwise divine forces pouring into and through all bodies, do you think for a moment you can escape the impression? So here I'm bugged. I'm disturbed. I will. One day the foundation is going to make a lot of sweatshirts. One of them will be, I'm disturbed. And then at the bottom, so back off, Jack. Something like that. So if all that's acting on me, what kind of mind decides that when it is an impression of something disturbing it, what kind of mind believes that the right reaction to the disturbance is to hate whatever the mind that is disturbed points to, when the whole point of the impression is to bring into your perception that level of consciousness that doesn't know what to do with these impressions? You're learning now, I trust. When we have a moment of resisting an impression, is not the resistance to the impression the killer of that moment? Yes or no? So if resistance is an impression killer, and it is. And by the way, you can't have resistance without identification. The only reason that you're resisting something is because something in you is already identified with how things should look when you see it. So here I am, and I'm instantaneous, I'm full of resistance. You know, the older you get, you don't become less resistant in case that's not clear to you yet. What do you think a grumpy old... I didn't mean to look over at you. What do you think a grumpy old man or a grumpy old woman is? It's just someone who no longer can deal with anything that doesn't look like it's supposed to look like, and believes that the reaction to what is causing it to feel pain proves that it is otherwise superior, because the judgment of the moment shows you're responsible. And the older you get, the less this personality creates these buffers. So it's kind of raw. It's all right there on the surface, which, by the way, is why you really want to go to work before you get too old. Because at a certain point, it won't be possible. Although I will say this, God does amazing things. A person can spend their whole life caught and have a single impression, and that one impression changes the direction of their existence, which isn't just determined by the life in this one body. Just like that, the whole thing. So, resistance is the what? And there can be no resistance without. So the minute I'm set against what I'm seeing, I have isolated myself from any possibility of being shown that what I am disturbed by can't be separated from the level of consciousness being disturbed. There's your hope. There is the end of the scattering of energies and the beginning of the gathering of them. Because instead of allowing resistance to point to what the reaction says is causing you the pain, now the energy of resistance itself serves to feed the impression. I'm going to go into this very deeply. I don't think during the Easter talk, maybe during the talks in the Pines. So resistance limits, without going into it, any possibility of understanding the whole reason for that moment. And there is a reason for the moment, and it's not personal. You've heard of the word karma? See, you think there's bad karma. I don't have time. There's no bad karma. There is just what draws to it, what it requires by the divine, which is what is drawing to it what it does, just a form of it. Is not mud a form of the divine? It is. It's just congealed light. And it is always trying to balance itself, everything trying to reconcile itself. That's why it's not personal. So here comes the possibility of this reconciliation, and instead of the reconciliation, I somehow or other decide what I need to do is change everything so that it looks like what I want it to look like, which means I'm fighting with you, I'm pointing to you, I've got this pain, and nothing happens. What do you think the exercise is? 3 words. Then I'll spend 2 minutes describing it. Impression without identification. Impression without identification. The impression has no identity. God, if you could see, are you able to see that to some extent? Impression has no identity. Why? Because the impression belongs to something that is timeless, energetic, full of light, coming this way, that strikes that which is old. That's what you say you want to be free of, and it strikes that. And there's no identity there. Why is there no identity? Because impression is transformation. And in the moment of true rebirth, which is transformation, who's there by your name being reborn? Nobody. Why is that funny, sweetheart?
It's such good news.
Oh, yeah. Well, it is good. It's my wife. She had a big chuckle. She said it's good news. It is good news because, oh my God, I have an impression now where I can see that immortality which I am drawn to seek isn't my immortality. But it is. I've seen it. I've tasted it. It's touched me. I've been touched by it. The Christ. So, impression without identification. As best you can, when the impression comes, wake up. When the impression comes, just let it be there without you mucking around with it. Because you muck. I don't like it. I don't like you, Guy Finley. You're not the only one. And thank God I'm not impressed. Or more clearly, thank God I've received that impression so much I know better than to believe in you or me. Impression without identification. Let it be pure. It'll take you a lifetime or more before you get your fingers out of the impressions. But as you begin to allow the impression to be the purity and to produce the purity it is intended to in the willing soul, then it becomes more and more evident to you what it is that I must do in every moment, which is to be aware of everything that is coming in, everything that is being produced through it, and every possibility that is revealed in that relationship, if I will stay out of it. If I stay out of it, I'm brought into another world. Let's take a break, come back and have our dialogue.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the second part of class. Before we continue, is there somebody who's still muted here? I hear a echo. Well, welcome back, everyone. As I said, before we get started with class, let me share a couple of updates for you, a couple of upcoming dates and announcements that I want you to know of. First of all, during the week, if you didn't know, we offer a full slate of classes here at the Life of Learning. We begin our week with this Sunday morning class, and then Guy speaks next again on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. And typically our Wednesday class is what we call Discovery Wednesday. But this upcoming Wednesday, next Wednesday, the 27th, we're going to try something new, something that we are calling Deep Dive Wednesday. And it's a great opportunity, I think, for us as students to take something that Guy has told us in a talk. Perhaps it's something that you may have read in one of his books, a short exercise or quote or story he's told, but something that has touched you as a student. And on Deep Dive Wednesdays, you can share those things with Guy and ask Guy to go a little deeper with those, to elaborate more on what was the lesson or what was the principle or how could you use that particular thought, idea, or exercise. So anyway, our first Deep Dive Wednesday is going to be next Wednesday, the 27th of March. And we encourage you as students, if there's something along those lines that I just mentioned, a quote, an idea, an exercise, if there's something that you would like Guy to elaborate on, you can write an email and send it to our contact form on our website. And that is guyfinley.org/contact. And we're going to use that site, that address, to kind of collect, hopefully from around the world, from all of us students, these kinds of ideas. And Guy will then choose from those to go into a deeper dive on Wednesday. So do take advantage of that. Think about that and send something in if you wish. The second announcement is, again, a save the date kind of announcement. We are just 2 weeks away from Easter Sunday, which is March 31st. And again, we want to invite you to join us for a very special Sunday of Wisdom here at the Life of Learning Foundation. Guy will be giving a very special Easter Sunday talk on the topic. I think you can see it on the screen there with me. The topic is Awaken the Indwelling Light of Christ, the journey beyond the mind to the heart of the cross. And this is a free talk, and it is part of this special ongoing series. And so if you're here, you will receive email notices about it. But we want you to particularly make note of it and don't miss it. Guy says that in this talk, he'll be exploring the subject of rebirth in depth. And what an appropriate topic, again, to be talking about on Easter Sunday. And we have a way for you to immerse yourself in this topic a little bit ahead of time, to prepare, so to speak, to look at some material, if you wish, that will help you better understand the material Guy will present on Easter Sunday. And that is, we've gone through the archive of Guy's talks and put together 3 past Easter talks that he's given for you to study and gain inspiration from. And this 3-part e-course series contains over 3 hours of material and some downloadable MP3s, as well as talks, which can be used as a great study guide. So please, if you're interested in having that material and doing a little work prior to our special Easter Sunday talk, they are available to you if you make a donation of $10 or more. And you can do so at guyfinley.org/Easter. If you go to that website and make that donation, you'll find out more about that special Easter package. So please do take advantage of it, and we hope that you will see us. If you can't be here in person on Easter Sunday, please join us online for this special Easter talk. And so just wanted to let you know that. All right, let's go back to the room and see if Guy is ready to begin our discussion. Guy, anything you'd like to say before we get started?
Nope.
Nope. All right, everyone. For those of you online, go to webinar. This is your chance to talk directly to Guy if you wish. Just click the hand icon on your control panel and that will put you into the queue. Or you can send in written questions, as is the case on both Facebook and YouTube as well. I do have a written question that we can start with, Guy. I think that seems the best place to start.
No, Patricia's on stage. We'll start with her.
All right, indeed. We'll start with Patricia.
My name is Patricia. You know, I imagine all of us, when we heard Guy's talk on impressions, we thought of different impressions we've had throughout our lives. And I have one from this morning and one from when I was a little girl. And I grew up in Buffalo, which has a lot of old buildings. And I was in one building, and it was etched in stone. I don't know if it was a post office or a bank or something, but it was etched in stone wall, know thyself. That impressed me. I can remember I was I'm riding my bike up and down the street, screaming, know thyself, know thyself. and it actually came to me, not now, but later. Yeah. And then I had an impression this morning, when I was waking up this morning, that I was impressed with an old thought of an enemy that I had that's not even alive anymore. And it was trying to get, and I remembered Guy's talk when he was saying about blame. And so I said, where am I getting a sense of identification from this negative thought about this old enemy? And when I saw it, it disappeared. But there's two impressions. One that could set your life in a beautiful way. You know, I spent my life looking for the truth. And one that could just take you into a bitter, ugly thing. But I do have to say something about Patrick and the whale. What impressed me about that was at one point, he just wanted to be with the whales. He loved it, and they embraced him. I mean, they would all gather around. These things are as big as this room. And you could just see they would run up to him and things, at least a couple of them he became friendly with. But then he thought he should put a camera on one of them that he thought he could do, because see what would happen when they dive deep. I guess they dive deep to eat squid and stuff like that. And as soon as he did it, the relationship changed. They sensed immediately he wasn't there with love. He was there for a purpose. And they rejected him for a little while. And then when he said, I'm sorry, and then they started coming back to him, and they embraced him as one of their own. I mean, kinda, you know, he's a man, and they're fish, or whales, or mammals. They're mammals.
Yes. All right, John.
All right, Guy, we will begin. We will go to our queue, and Fiona is in the queue. Good morning, Fiona.
Morning, John. Hello, Guy.
Hi, Fiona.
I love that talk about the whales, Patrick and the whales, and reminds me. I will send a link over about this lady in South Africa who speaks with animals, and she communicates in the same way in that she understands the laws that are there that she can immerse in, and when you're given that. Anything working through us where we can just watch is the natural way to be. Of course, that's going to be your experience.
Yeah.
It's just so hard when you're in life with work and things. I'm seeing that it's taking that risk or that jump into, okay, I understand these principles and I feel these principles, but then allowing it to happen is something else. Allowing it to be there to work through you more and not to get involved is the only way to be.
If you do your level best, Fiona, which I know you do, if you do your level best to get out of the way whenever you have the impression of Fiona's willfulness, her insistence. If you do your best to get out of the way. Are you barking at me, Fiona? If you do your best to get out of the way, you will surely remain in the way long enough to be shown where that impediment takes place. And at some point, you'll have no choice but to drink from the cup you don't want to. It won't be your choice, and you'll know it very clearly in that moment. But nevertheless, you will. And that's just the way it goes. What's hard isn't the world we're in. What's hard is the fear this world has created in the pursuit of itself and the longing to affirm itself. So in the end, what's hard is what's very hard on us. We just don't understand that relationship yet with it. But as you do, you'll see, what is that? My yoke is easy and my burden is light. It doesn't mean it's not work. Tilling the field, it's always work. But at a certain point, you'll actually understand without having to take a thought, it isn't you tilling the field. You are the field, you are the tiller, you are the seed, you are even what is tilling it. Then it's a different world for you. You'll see. Do you celebrate St. Paddy's Day in Scotland, Fiona?
St. Patrick's Day is celebrated all over the world. But you know, it's funny because St. Andrew's Day is the Scottish day, and yeah, it's just not really celebrated as much. I don't know why.
Well, we're going to change that, I'll tell you. I got an email from somebody because of something my brother had me do with this 23andMe thing from a third cousin who's in Scotland. And my wife says, I'm not Scot. Oh, yes, I am.
Yes, you are.
Yes, I am. In heart, if nothing else. Bye, Fiona.
Absolutely. Bye for now. Bye.
All right, Guy, we'll go next with a written question that we had come in. This came in from Claudia. Let me just move my screen a little bit so I can read it to you. Claudia asked you, hello, Guy. What is the feeling of isolation and loneliness that sometimes arises when one is in a group or crowd? Does it come from wanting something from those people? Unconscious demands? I experience it as a diffused or scattered feeling. I used to think it was a lack of connection, but I'm beginning to suspect it's some kind of unspoken expectation or demand on the situation. Thank you for your input.
Claudia, it's all of the above and more. I don't know where the particular note is. I had an impression of something and I started to jot down something about it. But the upshot had something to do with the idea of the ugly duckling, a story about a lion cub that I wrote in one of my books. It is so confusing to be a man or a woman with some pronounced awareness of the difference between their true nature and the nature that they have taken on as given through immersion in this world. You can be with your mother and father and feel as if, I often ask this question, I often said, was I adopted? So some of that isolation and loneliness is just the fact that you're someplace doing something with essentially no meaning at all, filled with people pursuing equally meaningless experiences and calling that life. And the reiteration of those impressions are a form of poison when they're taken inconsistently into that consciousness, because then it becomes dependent upon that for the continuation of its identity. It used to bother me to death. I've told this story here in this class, maybe not in this class, but at some point. I can even remember his name, John Coldren. He belonged to some boys group that was headed up by some man for problem children. And one day John and his mother said, I don't know why they asked me, do you want to go to this meeting? And I said, no. Come on, okay. And I remember sitting in this room with maybe 14 boys, roughly my own age, and this counselor. And he was telling them, oh, you're all loved. And you should feel this love. And come on and let's have this big group hug so everybody can feel the love. And I didn't want anything to do with it. And I remember, and he said, what's the problem? I said, I don't know what love is. I don't think this is love. You can imagine how popular I was. I don't think this is love. In one world it is. Maybe the boys need some real self-esteem. But all of that will prove futile in the end if it isn't transformed. So there's a long answer to that, Claudia. And you will have to find out by yourself through your work. And you will. John, anybody else?
Yes, Guy. We'll go next to Nick in the queue.
Charlie, what
Nick.
did you put in the fireplace, Charlie? Firecrackers. Cherry bombs, man. Jumping out of my seat every time one of those things goes off. Do you know what causes that in a fireplace? Air bubbles.
Nick.
Nick.
Your hand.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was still.
Surely I digress. Nick, are you there?
Yes, sir. Thanks, John and Guy, of course. You know, it's been a week since I've been left, and just been a wonderful experience while I was there, Guy. I just want to say that. It was filled with serendipity. That's something I never expected. So many things happened. And I might want to ramble just for a second. So many things happened. When I first paid Chris, I thought, Chris, I was going to tell her, can I just pay until noontime tomorrow? I wasn't sure if I was going to make the 3 weeks I was there. And sure, the 3 weeks was great. And that I ended up staying there. While I was there, Guy, I sat by the babbling brook in the back of your, and just sat there. I've walked over many streams, but it was pouring down rain, and I got a chair, and I just watched the brook keep on coming and coming. It was a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
And it was a letting go experience of letting life just come and letting life just come. And so that was a great teacher for me, the babbling brook. And real quick, the banks that I have are made up of conditioning.
Okay,
and
Nick, hold on 1 second.
yes, okay, yeah, sure.
Not an objection.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have a new impression.
Mm-hmm.
Slow the roll.
Mm-hmm.
That means I'm going to be aware of this anxious energy pushing these words out so that I have the impression of myself in a new way, and then I can deliberately use that energy that is squandered to collect a new understanding of myself. So
Yes.
finish up what you're going to say, but let's deliberately bring ourselves back and be aware as we can of the energy that is talking for us. Got it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Of course. Thank you. And I just wanted to close with the banks were once made up of the conditioning,
Nick,
my desire.
Nick. You didn't slow down at all, man.
Okay. All right.
It's going to be painful, but if you do, you'll see something that you've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's have the part 2.
All right. The banks, Guy, were made up of once of conditioning and desire, where they got replaced with obedience or surrender, which has obedience in it, and I believe, and trust, which was a great gift. And there was other things that I don't need to get into, but there was many, many serendipities that happened, which I'm grateful for.
And I'm glad for you too, Nick. Remember this.
I'll just close with that.
Remember this, what I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to meet fear, not let it talk for you.
Mm-hmm.
You must meet it, and the only way you meet it is face to face.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Face to face means I'm going to have the willingness to explore what happens if I really slow myself down when I'm talking to people. Then you'll understand who's talking. You'll speak more clearly, and you'll begin to gain a new understanding that will go before you in every relationship you have to make sure that you're the one in charge of that moment, because you are relying on something in charge in you to show you that. All right? We'll work at it together every time you call.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Over to you, John.
All right, Guy, I'm going to come back on. I've gotten a couple of written questions that Kate sent me. Here's the first of them. It comes from Susanna. Susanna asked, first, she says, so every disturbance has a message to tell us about something that is hidden to ourselves? And then she referred to the story, our skip. And she says, know thyself. Why didn't the woman not want to face the 7 mirrors? Why so repulsive an image?
Well, I'm not that woman, but I can speak for her. What do you think happens, Susanna? You look into the eyes of that person at work. You look in the rearview mirror at a car that's pressing you on the road. You look into the mirror of your own past. What is my reaction when I'm faced with these things? And suddenly I don't want to see that. I don't want to go through that. I don't want this experience. What is it that doesn't want that experience? And what it is that rejects the experience is some conditioned aspect, not of Susanna, but of this consciousness that has taken on the name Susanna, or more accurately, that was given that name, and that doesn't know what else to do when it looks in mirrors that don't reflect what it believes the nature of reality is. I know this is shocking, but you and I are not the creators of reality, but we are the ones who experience the misunderstanding of it. So let me see if there's anything else in here. And yes, every disturbance is because a transformation is taking place. Every disturbance is because a transformation is taking place. The question is, what is being transformed? And it's answered by who is aware of that disturbance. Your higher understanding, your true nature, realizes I must leave this impression alone so that the full reflection can carry itself out and be completed. The other part doesn't want it and rejects it, and that ensures that you will, Susanna, that nature, reincarnate itself and get to experience itself again and again and again. Okay, John.
So here is another written question I have, Guy. Our queue is wide open, but this written question came in from Susie. And Susie says, hi, Guy and all. When does it become more seen that I made a choice with this journey and become less hard and more invigorating, exciting, and consciously creative, fun play? Love your beautiful talks.
You will understand that you have, in quotes, chosen this journey to the extent you see what is acting within you and choosing the path you're on that has so much pain in it. And Susie, to be clear, there is nothing more invigorating, to use that word, and properly exciting than a relationship that is forged out of love. But you must never believe, let alone forget, that what love forges is for the sake of a new conception, and that nothing is newly conceived without some form of suffering. So that you should get rid of as best you're able, and you will one day without having to take thought about it. Get rid of this idea of being some creative, fun person playing at life. That's a bunch of hooey that somebody sold you so they could get their hands on your money. Life is sometimes a playground, but it is always first and foremost a laboratory. Okay, John.
Yes, Guy, we have two hands in the queue, Jill and Robert. So let's go to Jill next. Hello, Jill, you're unmuted. I see your microphone's green, Jill. Go ahead and say something.
Something. Okay, let's try to get Jill back. We always like talking to Jill. And go on to
All
Robert.
right, we'll try her again, Jill. We'll go next to Robert, Guy, and see if we can work things out with Jill. Hello, Robert.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Your talk brought to mind the first time I ran into that experience we call impression. And I was a boy, rode my bike over to a record store. This particular record store had different rooms for different kinds of music. I'd already been playing guitar for several years. Walked into this one room and it froze me. And that impression was Beethoven was playing. I'd never heard this before. And the thing that was so special about that is I had no words for it. And I didn't even know what the word impression probably was at that time, other than the fact that it hit me and took me to a place I'd never known before.
Right.
And it drove me for so many years, even till this day.
Yeah.
And it's just a great way to find impressions is through music. You can almost program it and teach yourself to be in a different place. And that was really my point.
Well, I would just say one thing carefully, Robert. I, every morning, literally have 2 or 3, maybe more, bits of music that I like to listen to, quite contemplative for me. But if listening to the music becomes a kind of hypnosis, which it can because it brings up very false, ultimately familiar feelings that are consoling, then suddenly instead of an impression, it becomes a kind of poison. It becomes something that is consumed by an unconscious nature for the sake of consoling itself with the comfort it felt the first time it had that impression. So one must be very careful of these things. Because some of us, I don't know if you know it, every blue moon, not at home, I don't do it, but sometimes in my car, I have on my iPhone some music that I've always liked. You know, Temptations, what's her name? A few lady singers. Anyway, the point is, you put that music on and you're transported back. Papa was a rolling stone. And you're back in the studio with the Temptations, which I actually was able to do. You know all of the accents, the rhythms. You know where the horns come in, like with Michael McDonald and the Doobies. You know, and you're doing. You're gone, and it's okay. Please let me make that clear. It's okay to be gone, but you must know that you're gone. Because if you don't know you're gone, you're gone. When you work hard, and I'm not your judge, you have to decide. I know my work is fairly consistent. And every once in a while, I just take a vacation. Meaning, I just do what I know I'm going to be asleep doing, so that I can rest from the activity of all that conscious work. So it's okay to rest. But don't take the rest for being the rest. Otherwise, you're gone. Okay. Anything else, John?
Yes, we're going to try to see if we can hook up with Jill here again, and then Irene is in the queue, and I think we might end with her. But let's try Jill again.
Okay.
Hello, Jill. Are you there? Hello, Jill. Your microphone's green. Are you there?
Katie's shaking her head. We don't know why we can't connect with Jill, but we will, through persistence, prevail, and we will speak. I give you my word. On we go, John.
Right. On we go then. We'll go to Irene then. Hello, Irene. You're unmuted.
Hi. Hi, Guy.
Hi, Irene.
Hi, sorry. The last 2 weeks have been sort of like dramatic and sort of whatever. I just wanted to say thank you for everything, and your amazing talks, and I haven't got anything else to say. Just thank you and gratitude.
I'm really grateful too. That's the truth.
It's beyond words. It's just beyond words.
In this field work. Yes.
I go in the day and I'm happy, just simple things, and thank you. That's all.
Yeah. You know, John Muir and some of the men and women, and not just in the Americas, wherever it was, someday, they're beginning to find out, for instance, that long before the 12th century, Vikings were wandering apart the northern parts of the United States. Yes, Doug. Doug's not identified. You Norwegian, you. He said, yeah. They might have been your ancestors, yes. But the point being is that there's lots of times, you know, when you go on a hike, Irene, and ask Barbara, you're going up a mountain. At first, you're there, I'm there, I love this, up I go. And then, how much further? And then you press on, and then suddenly, what you had to go through to make the discovery that you did proved more valuable than what you had to suffer to make it. That's the journey, and one day you'll understand these opposites that come and go along the journey. When these men went and discovered these vast, beautiful open plains, they had to go over huge mountain ranges to discover them. So I don't want to see this in front of me, but if I'll go into and through what I see, I will come on the other side and see why it was valuable to go through that. Yes? Yes. What else, John?
One written question just came in, guys, so perhaps we can end with that. Let me come on here.
And we will.
This just came in from Neil.
Yes.
Neil said, is life always suffering? When does an understanding of that condition become transformed into a new understanding that is a lesson or an impression that brings a peace to any moment?
Neil, peace, P-E-A-C-E, is never in pieces, P-I-E-C-E-S. And the only thing that brings the disparate pieces, P-I-E-C-S, into a P-E-A-C-E that transcends understanding is through the integration of the formerly divided consciousness. The formerly divided consciousness has no interest in yielding itself. By its nature, it resists anything that acts upon it that isn't already known by it. And in that innate resistance, there is a form of suffering. so that there is no birth of anything that isn't given through some form of suffering, what is required for it to find that piece of a new unity. That's my answer, and goodbye.
Guy, would you like to
Wait,
continue the broadcast?
Wait.
Students coming up?
I was wrong. Katie says I was wrong. And God knows, between Chris and Kate and my wife, I am wrong.
It's not all that bad.
Okay.
Good morning, my name is Kate. Following what Neil just asked about with suffering, I had an impression early on in the talk about suffering. And that, a long time ago, a guy said something like, we live in a very narrow bandwidth in our lives. And, I could probably go back and find that talk and what he said, and I probably will, actually. But, just thinking through this, like, we're trying to allow that bandwidth to be broadened, to be increased. And, when there's suffering going on, Kate is so resistant to that and not used to it that it feels, boy, I want to say this right.
Take your time.
Being vulnerable is not a bad place to be. Being vulnerable, being open, means that you're being brought into, a bigger bandwidth that you didn't even know you had the capability of, that's meant to be developed in you. Guy said in the talk, a lesson is only a real lesson when it changes the matter that absorbs the energy within that moment. That's really deep. A lesson is only a real lesson when it changes the matter that absorbs the energy within that moment. It's like this, I can feel that something in me is reaching for an understanding here and not quite getting it.
We're willing to let you reach. It helps all of us. It's just painful.
Right. Maybe that's part of it.
Yeah,
exactly
it
ties
is.
in with what I'm trying to
Yes, it does.
express.
Relax and you can help her.
Sometimes you can be amazed at seeing a creature grow from literally a little baby up to a big person. And that's like the body being brought through a natural process of expanding and growing and receiving and becoming something completely developing, that seed developing. I mean, it's beautiful when you witness that.
It moves into a space already created for it.
Perfect.
That's it, see? Go ahead.
Yeah, it moves into a space. So there's something being transformed when that energy is absorbed. That transformation is naturally happening, and that it being moved into that space.
That's already prepared
It's already
for it.
there for it.
Yes.
And I don't know, there's just so many things. I don't know how he puts it into words. This exchange that's going on, this ever-expanding, growing, changing life. I think I better leave it there. A lot of impressions with today's talk on impressions.
Come on, Doug. All right, Debbie, then Doug.
Hi, my name's Debbie. And you were talking about music earlier with Robert. And I'm taking violin lessons right now, and my teacher is trying to help me with the emotional aspects of it. And it's interesting because just now I have been drawn to the music of a particular musician who's a cellist. And his cello playing has moved me so much. And I've wanted to find out about the person that's playing like this. There's got to be something different about him because he plays Leonard Cohen's Alleluia. It was on a meeting we had recently, and it turns out that, well, from a very young age, he was taught classical music and thought that was what he wanted to do, was to bring this beauty to people. And he said that, I just didn't want to get wrapped up in this world the way it is. I wanted to just bring beauty to people. And it was such a beautiful sentiment. But the other thing that he does is go for long walks, because he then can see his thoughts. And so I thought, yeah, maybe this person knows a little bit more than others. But anyway, it's just wonderful. I was drawn to that, and that's a little bit of what Guy's talked about today. You're drawn to what's going to transform you if you allow that to happen.
Good.
And one more thing, just in music, a lot of hard work. I think that's essentially, any great musician is a product of incredible love for what he does and hard work.
Which is the suffering.
Yeah.
I'm drawn to a love that requires suffering to know that love.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that there's these two words recently, and I came here this morning thinking, I want to talk about this, but I don't really have an avenue. And the two words are watch and pray. And you created the avenue today, because why would we watch and pray? A lot of you've heard in the New Testament, Christ will say, watch and, could you not just watch with me? Watch and pray, or keep watching and keep praying so you don't come into temptation. That's in one of the epistles. Why do that? So that we can be present for impressions. If I don't watch and pray, where am I? It's like what Leah was saying earlier, I'm just in thought. The thought is creating conditions which I think are impressions. And they really aren't. They're just conditions to resist, well, for the most part. But like a few of us were on a bike ride yesterday, and I was trying to use those two words because, whether you're on a walk or a bike ride, you're doing things, your mind, you really have to rein it in because it just wants to go all over the place. But when I could just come back, and it's not that these words are mantras or anything, but just anything to help me remember myself, I could see things that I couldn't see when I was just lost in thought. So why watch and pray? I think the temptation that's talked about in that verse is just, you're losing the possibility of your life by not being present, by not watching, keep praying. Just like when Christ said, knock on the door and it would be open, he says, keep knocking. It's something, as we all know, sitting here, we walk out of here and here comes our day. What am I going to do today? Here it is. And you lose the ability to feel the impressions. And I'm really thankful for what you shared today, because you basically try to open up a whole new world
That's what we want.
For all of us. So
yeah.
Hi, my name is Leah. I had a full circle moment during this talk. When I was 4, I was 4 years old and raised in church. And I vividly remember, like it's still happening, this impression: God loves me. And that impression led Leah this being on a quest, and looked through so many different doors to what God loves me, and trying to console this being with that, and all these different imaginations around what that meant.
Yes.
And it wasn't until I came here. All three of those words Leah didn't understand. Leah didn't understand what God was, what love was, or what me was.
Correct.
All three. At the same time, that impression, like you said, was a life-changing impression. Because regardless of all the love of ambition that drove Leah, it wasn't love of music. I loved music, but I loved ambition more. And the work that went into ambition.
Careful with the word I.
Yes, she loved. God loves me is what brought me here, and I'm just so grateful.
Those three words are a trinity, aren't they? Actually, a singularity. It's a beautiful day. We've had a very nice time together. Do your work, and I'll see you Wednesday. Bye.